first time I did the Blackburn challenge, it ended up in disaster at sea. Well, we're going back for more, and some people might say, why do you do adventures like this? We're going to meet a friend of mine, Nat, who's a very successful businessman. We're going to find out why Nat does a challenge like the Blackburn and what lessons he's learned from it that can apply to you. The Blackburn Challenge was named after Howard Blackburn, the toughest of a tough breed, a Gloucester fisherman. He was separated from his mother's ship in a barely floating 10-foot dory, lost at sea, spending 5 torturous days cascading up and down during a brutal North Atlantic blizzard, with only a dead body for company. Blackburn fished from the 65-foot Grace L. Fears, where the men would stretch out from the ship in pairs on tiny dories to ply out their long fishing lines. A freak storm whipped up, and soon the 2 men were beaten by monstrous waves, then left for dead. After 2 days, the conditions were so brutal, Blackburn's dory mate gave up and invited death's embrace like slipping into the relief of a warm bath. Not Blackburn, though. His hands were frozen through, solid as steak from the freezer. He tied his useless mitts onto the oars and kept fighting, with his frostbite-blackened fingers immobile but attached to his oars. They became the clubs that beat back a hungry sea. Blackburn's courage and perseverance paid off. He made it to the coast of Newfoundland, where he spent 2 months recuperating before he finally returned to Gloucester, emerging from his frozen hell. Fast forward to 2016. In Blackburn's honor, crews from around the world descend on Gloucester, Massachusetts. For me, last year the challenge was insurmountable. Our double scull, made for ocean racing, snapped in half like a toothpick. This year, my partner Nat rose to the challenge and decided to tempt the Blackburn again, this time in a single scull. I took a cruise up to Nat's house to see what attracts a successful CEO like him to a challenge like the Blackburn.
Hi, I'm Nathaniel Greene. I run a consulting company that helps large industrial companies solve tough problems. If I look back in my life, I often choose a harder path or a more exciting path. I get bored doing the same thing, and my sort of athletic career it mirrors that. I've played 10 sports at a reasonable level, never mastered any of them. One of the things I found helpful, though, of course, is to do some challenges outside of work, and I think those bring lessons back in. There's no question for me. I mean, when I'm training hard for challenge, I perform better at work. There's always a new challenge, and things are always changing. I mean, it's a bit of a cliche, right? But things are always changing. You never know what's going to hit you next, because it's the stuff that you know. I'm going to sound like Donald Rumsfeld, right? It's the known knowns, all fine. It's the unknown unknowns that get you. So, what happens is, as soon as you think you're in control and you get complacent, something comes and bites you in the ass. New challenges require new learning and a new test of what you're up for. What I'm noticing myself about my life and my career is that there are clearly different phases. And I sort of liken it to different plateaus as you're climbing a mountain. You reach another promontory or some other sort of interesting geographical feature. And when you get there, you can look around, you can understand what you want to do next. Maybe you want to head back down, maybe you want to camp, maybe you want to push on. And for me, I can see definitely different distinct phases. Usually where there's a challenge that I face, we push at it, we conquer it, and then it's a question of what to do next, because doing the same thing gets boring. I'm really looking at challenges now that push me in a couple of ways. One is there is sort of no limit, and you're not competing against anyone else. You're competing against yourself. 18 months ago, my wife signed me up for a rowing club. I'd been interested in doing it, but I allowed sort of busyness of work and other things to prevent me from getting started. 8 weeks later, I found myself having signed up to row the Blackburn Challenge. If I have a little bit of help initiating or friends involved, it's so much easier to get into something crazy. I did it obviously with Sweeney, a good buddy of mine, who happens to be an exceptional sculler. It's always good when you're learning to scull and a bit of a donkey to have a powerhouse in the boat with you. So, we set off 8 weeks or so after I'd first had my first sculling lesson, and we rowed sort of 3 or 4 miles, and this happened to be the worst weather in the 29 years of running this race, and our double scull snapped in half in 4 to 5 foot seas, and we sank and had to be rescued. So that was the end of that, and it was probably the best thing that could happen for me. That, of course, ensured that I learned how to scull properly and entered the race again, which I did this year for the 30th running of the race. My biggest learning in trying to row in a double was how hard it is to keep time. I mean, it's just super hard for me to keep time. When you learn anything new, just like with a new business challenge, when you first started it, there's like 15 moving parts, and if you let them all float out there together, it can be overwhelming. Sort of find a way to break it down and have 2 or 3 of them become natural. And the wonderful thing is when it all comes together and you're working at something new and it seems overwhelming. You're not sure if you're going to get through it, and in rowing, rowing in the double, suddenly you have a good stroke. For me, I think that's the magical moment, because in anything you're doing, when you know you're going to get there and you can succeed, it then just becomes work, right? It's not an insurmountable challenge. It's just because I've never been necessarily a big adventure guy. I was mostly doing smaller things, like, as I said, playing squash. But you just get into the zone, and it gives you so much time to think. Just the little things, and that was really opened my mind to some stuff about what you miss while rushing through life. And it was sort of unexpected. That was very unexpected. One of the key lessons from the Blackburn last year was you can't guarantee success. You can't head into something judging whether it was a worthy effort based on the outcome. And in the case of rowing in the double last year, the fact that the boat snapped in half in its horrendous weather, I mean, every boat in our class failed to finish. So the fact that it happened, that's outside of my control. Preparing for it, getting fitter, learning to row better, that's in my control, but the outcome of the race isn't. And that was a key lesson. A lesson this year is, there's, again, and it's one that's so obvious, right? There's always more to learn. You can always get much better, and it's not always what you think. There's sort of an infinite amount of wisdom and advice out there. I think the real issue is whether you're listening. The great things about doing these bigger adventures for me in the last few years is that I've felt that fear again. And so one of the things I've learned from these bigger challenges for me is I've rekindled that understanding of, wow, I don't know what to do here. I need to learn. I need to go out and get help on this point. I need to practice and train. How do individuals know what level of challenge they're ready for? I don't know, just ratchet it up, try something. And you'll know if you hesitate at signing up for it. That's a clear sign. And that's why I found it so helpful in terms of pushing my comfort zone, to have friends or a buddy that I do that with. I think one of the best things is to build a network of friends who like doing different sort of crazy things and being involved in that network, because otherwise you somehow have to decide to push into a zone that you think is nuts, sort of by definition, and it's kind of nearly impossible to do. I mean, you almost have to be mentally ill, to even just do that voluntarily without some sort of support network helping you. Or you're going to undercall it. You're going to end up choosing something that's far less than what you actually can do. Do something today that will make you proud rather than just kill the day wasting time.